What's going on, guys? Bolts here, back with another video. With GMs right around the corner, I just wanted to make a quick GM build guide. These are going to be the builds that I'm going to be using. I know I solo GMs. I've soloed GMs the past 2 seasons. Plan on doing it again this season, so look out for those. But I just wanted to give you guys a video on the builds I'm using, and also tips if you aren't a solo player and not trying to solo them. I'll put some tips in there for what your fire team could be using as well. Without further ado, let's get right into the builds. All right, I will be going in numerical order in which the GMs will show up. I believe I have the rotation down. So starting with Proving Grounds, we are going to be using Strand Warlock. 2 key components I want to highlight here before I get into the mods are Osteostriga and Necrotic Grip. Osteostriga spreads poison to everybody. It does amazing damage, amazing AoE damage. And it actually stacks with Necrotic Grips, which will spread even more poison to targets. All right, getting into the subclass stuff here. Obviously, like I said, Strand Warlock. We're going to be using Healing Rift, Burst Glide, melee ability, and the Shackle Grenade. Aspects, the only 2 aspects that are on this character are Weaver's Call, which casting our Rift throws out 3 Threadlings, and Threadlings do really good damage. This is good synergy with our build. And Mindspun Invocation, which we consume our Shackle Grenade and it gives us Weaver's Trance. And while Weaver's Trance is active, if we get Final Blows, it creates a suspending detonation, so it will suspend basically all the targets in the area, and that paired with Osteostriga is very good. Threat of Mind, so defeating suspended targets grants class ability energy. Again, good synergy with our build. Dealing damage generates grenade energy and Threat of Generation. This is obviously very good too. We want that grenade to be up as frequent as possible. And Threat of Fury, dealing or damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy. Also very good, because with our melee we can keep damaging stuff over time. If we hit something with the melee, it kind of does a little tangle around them that does like pretty consistent damage. It lasts quite a bit of time, so that one's good as well. And Threat of Continuity, which basically for this build, Suspend will have increased duration. All right, for the mods, feel free to just take a screenshot or pause the video now to just copy these down if you already kind of know what these mods do. But briefly, I'm just going to explain. Kinetic Siphon, so we create orbs of power by killing things with our Osteostriga. Ashes to Assets, don't quote me on this, not sure if this really works with Warlock, and especially because we are consuming our grenade with this build, not really sure if this works too well with Strand. But Heavy Ammo Finder, it increases the drop of heavy ammo on a kill. If you're with a fire team, you could definitely change out this Ashes to Assets to the Heavy Ammo Scout, so when your Finder brick gets created, it will also create one for your allies. So very good, but I'm mainly a solo player, so I don't really need that. So for our Necrotic Grips, we're going to be using Impact Induction, causing damage with a melee attack, reduces your grenade cooldown. This is good synergy because, as I mentioned, using the charge melee has Strand weave in and out of an enemy, and it causes damage constantly for quite a good amount of time actually. So we just want that grenade synergy there. Focusing Strike grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a melee attack. Again, we want our class ability up as much as possible. 1 for the healing, because you have enemies hurt, and 2 for the 3 Threadlings that it will spawn with the aspect that we have. Font of Focus, so when we have an armor charge, which you get by picking up an Aura of Power, gain bonus to Discipline. For our chest mod, or chest mods, I should say, I'm using double solar resist for the Cabal in this GM, and void resist for the boss because he does do void damage. Void weapon surge on the boots, I'm going to be using an LMG that's void. You can either use the corrective measure, which drops from the Vault of Glass, or the commemoration, probably butchering that name, but it spawns, it drops from the Deepstone Crypt. Invigoration, so reduces melee cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. Again, just keeping that synergy going. And Kinetic Weapon Surge, so our Osteostriga will also do more damage when we have an armor charge. And lastly, on the class item, we're going to be using Bomber to reduce grenade cooldown when using your class ability, and Outreach reduces melee cooldown when using your class ability. Just keep those abilities up. And Time Dilation, so our decaying armor charge has longer duration to keep that synergy going. Weapon damage, boosted discipline, etc. All right, and for the weapons, I'm going to be using Osteostriga, obviously centered around my whole build. The BXR Battler with Incandescent for the anti-barrier, and the Corrective Measure, because I do not have the LMG from the Deepstone Crypt raid. All right, this is a build that I might be switching to if I can't seem to get it done with the Strand Warlock very well. But like I said, if you're with a fire team, this is definitely one you should use. An Invis Hunter build. You literally have constant invisibility. It's great. You have constant uptime on your melee and your dodge. This is a very good one to use if you're playing with people and if you're solo. Let's get into the mods for it. All right, our exotic is Graviton Forfeit, so it improves our invisibility. It makes it longer, so we could be invis longer, which allows us to have those abilities come back quicker and quicker. For the helmet, we have double ashes to assets to get our super back fast on grenade kills. Heavy ammo finder. And for the gauntlets, we have impact induction. We get our grenade cooldown every time we damage something with a melee. And firepower, so our grenade final blows create auras of power. And since I do not have 100 discipline, I'm using Font of Focus, so I can gain a bonus to discipline when I have an armor charge. For the chest plate, I'm running 1 solar resist, 1 void resist, and charged up, so it increases the maximum amount of number of armor charges that we can carry. And for the boots, I have on Solar Weapon Surge for my Skyburner's Oath, which I'll get into in a second, and double Void Weapon Surge for our heavy, which is a Void LMG. And finally, on the class item, we have double Bomber, so we get our grenade back faster when we use our class ability, and we'll constantly be using our class ability because we'll be spamming invis. And lastly, utility kickstart. So we gain class ability energy when we use our class ability, essentially. All right, for the weapons, I'm going to be using Peace of Mind for the anti-barrier. It's a pretty fast shooting pulse rifle in the connect slot, so you can pretty much shred through those barriers. You can also use Arbalest instead. At least one person on your fire team can use Arbalest. But one person on your fire team should also be using Skyburner's Oath, because for whatever reason, it can shoot through the Cabal shields where you have to shoot the little node in the middle. So you're pretty much throwing if you don't have this on, which is why I might switch to it. And then I have a LMG, as I mentioned, the Void one. Your heavy's kind of interchangeable. Like I said, I'm doing this solo, so kind of is pretty nitpicky for me, but feel free to use any heavy you want. Lastly, I would probably bring in an Arc Titan with Heart of Inmost Light to constantly spam storm grenades and abilities, just with the amount of ads in here. Very good build. Let's get into it. All right, we are going to be on Thunder Crash. I'm going to be using Thruster, Strafe Lift, Shoulder Charge ability, and Storm Grenades. Basically, the name of this game is going to just be spamming storm grenades and using all of our abilities with Heart of Inmost Light. I'm not going to go into it too in depth here, just kind of going to show you the aspects and fragments that I use, as well as the mods on my armor. So for the helmet, double ashes to assets. You can change this Siphon mod out however you want, but since I'm using the LMG, I got Avoid Siphon. Double grenade kickstart to get our grenade ability back once we throw a grenade, and firepower, so our grenades create orbs of power to keep those armor charges up. You can either use a solar resist or a void resist. I chose solar because of all the Cabal. And a double charged up, so it increases the amount of armor charges we can have. Double insulation reduces class ability cooldown each time we pick up an orb of power. and stacks on stacks. So picking up an overpower grants 1 additional stack of armor charge. And finally, for our class item, we have Outreach, so it reduces melee cooldown when you're using your class ability, just keeping those abilities up with Heart of Inmost Light. And double utility kickstart, so when our class ability energy is fully expended, you gain class ability energy that will consume a armor charge. This is really good for ad control as well as boss damage. Storm grenades do a lot of damage as well as thunder crash. All right, moving on to the Mars Battleground. I will be using the Invis Hunter build that I showed just previously. It is the exact same build. The only thing I change is to double arc resist for the boss and all the hive. So feel free to pause and take screenshot here. Don't really feel like explaining the build twice, just waste time. So there you go. Weapons, I'm going to be using Wish Ender for anti-barrier, a shoot to loot explosive payload scout rifle since I'm going to be keeping my distance. Shoot to loot is very good here. And since I won't have a lot of time where I'm not moving, a lasting impression rocket launcher. This is, you can change this heavy to anything you want if you're playing with people, but since I'm solo, this is what I'm using. All right, now this is solely if you are playing with people. I would recommend a Arc Titan as one of the other people on your fire team. Again, a lot of these are going to be duplicate builds here, but the exact same build as the Arc Titan one for Proving Grounds. The only thing that's changed again is the Arc Resist mods. Everything else is the same. Weapons, I would have somebody on Arbalist, so I just put that on my Titan. Again, the shoot to loot scout rifle, and I put on an LMG for ad clear, but this is really good with the storm grenade spam and just constantly keeping up on those ads because there's a lot of ads in this Battlegrounds. All right, the last subclass that I recommend for the Mars Battlegrounds if you're playing with teammates would be a Well of Radiance Warlock. Keep yourself alive and your allies alive. Going to be using Empowering Rift because we're going to pair that with Starfire Protocol. Get infinite fusion grenades, obviously fusion grenades. You get 2 of them with Starfire Protocol. I'm using Burst Glide, but and Celestial Fire. You can definitely use Incineration Snap. I just like Celestial Fire because it just travels further, quick easy damage. For aspects, we have Icarus Dash and Touch of Flame, which is crucial because our fusion grenades will explode twice and do dummy stupid damage. Ember of Resolve, so with your infinite fusion grenades you will literally heal yourself every time you get a kill. Ember of Char, your Solar Ignition spread more scorch to targets. Ember of Mercy, so when you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies gain restoration. This is very good, especially in a GM. Keep yourselves alive. And picking up a Fire Sprite also grants restoration. This is good if you're solo as well, and even if you're playing with people, honestly. And lastly, Ember of Eruption, so your solar conditions have increased area of effect. For the mods, we're going to be using double ashes to assets to get our Well of Radiance back faster, spamming those infinite fusion grenades. You will gain a shit ton of super energy, so basically you'll pop your well and you will have a well back within less than a minute. It's pretty busted. As well as Void Siphon, so our rapid void weapon final blows create an orb of power. So I'm going to be using a Void LMG. For the gauntlets, we have double Void Loader, again for the LMG, just to reload faster. And firepower, which is important because all the green, the tossy throwing fucking nades that you're doing, yeah, you're going to spawn a shit ton of orbs, which will pair with our boot mods in a second here. Arc resistance just for the boss and the hive. Charged up, so increase the maximum number of armor charges we can have. And then for the boots, we have solar weapon surge. This is just going to be for my primary because I'll be using the scout rifle again. It'll just do more damage when I have an armor charge. Same thing with the kinetic weapon. That'll be for my wither horde, and the void weapon for my LMG. Lastly, for the bond, we have time dilation, so our armor charges will decay at a little longer duration, and we have 2 of those because they do stack. Basically, we'll be doing more damage with these surge mods longer than usual. And lastly, the weapons. Wither Horde, this is very good. If you stick something with Wither Horde, like a boss, or just throw it at some ads, you're in an empowering rift, you throw that on somebody, and you literally will just get your grenades back faster, because you have to do damage in a rift or a well to get your grenades back faster. I'm just using the scout rifle again for the shoot to loot for the distance and the unstop, and a corrective measure for ad clear. All right, now moving on to the Hypernet Current, which is the new strike this season with Lightfall. I'm going to be using Well Warlock. I honestly recommend 3 Well Warlocks for this if you're going to run this with people. Having that constant well up is amazing because this boss room and everything else sucks in this. I did make a few changes to the fragments. I swapped some of the fragments out for Ember of Ashes, so I apply more scorched text to targets, and Ember of Searing, so defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. I really just want this for the fire sprite so I can have restoration and constantly heal myself. You can use the one that I just explained. I'm really just using this one for solo, so the solo players feel free to use that one as well. And the only other thing I changed is my weapons. I'm going to be using Osteostriga for the overload. I'm still going to be using this scout rifle because shoot to loot. The boss room's pretty big, and if I get too close to the boss, I'm literally instantly dead. So I'm using shoot to loot for the heavy, and I'm going to be using my corrective measure again. Everything else, all the mods are basically the same. All right, as I mentioned, probably 3 well locks for the Hypernet Current strike, or GM, I should say. So I'm going to move on to the arms dealer, the revamped version. I'm going to be using Void Warlock with Nova Bomb. Going to be using Healing Rift, Burst Glide, Pocket Singularity, and our Vortex Grenades. The aspects you want to use are Chaos Accelerant. So our Vortex Grenades have increased the size and linger duration of the Vortex. And Feed the Void, defeating a target with Void ability to activate Devour. This is how we're going to stay alive. We're going to constantly have grenades up due to Controverse Hold. I'll explain that in a second when I get into the mods, but it's very good to have and is a must. For the fragments, I'm using Echo of Expulsion, which Void ability final blows cause targets to explode. This will be very good for ad clear. Echo of Remnants, so our lingering grenade effects. So our Vortex Grenade in this case has increased duration, so stays on the field longer. And Echo of Undermining, where our Void Grenades weaken targets. I know it's minus 20 discipline, but it is very much worth it to have. All right, for the mods on our helmet, we're going to be using double Ashes to Assets to have our Nova Bomb up a lot. We're going to be spamming a bunch of grenades. Heavy Ammo Finder. And then onto the gauntlets, as I mentioned, Controverse Hold. So this improves the charging of our Void Grenade. So basically with Controverse Hold, we can hold down our Void Grenade using our grenade button, and we can overcharge it, and once we throw it out, it'll do damage, and as we do damage, that will give us grenade energy back. If I pair that with double grenade kickstart, if I have an armor charge, I will get grenade energy back even faster. So I will basically always have my grenades up because I'm using firepower, which grenade final blows create orbs of power. For the chest plate, I'm using solar resist mods. You can definitely use a arc resist instead of double solar resist, but since I'm doing it solo, I like to use double solar resist because the turrets and all the Cabal, they all shoot solar. So I'm just trying to stay alive as much as possible, give me every advantage. I'm using charged up here, and the reason I'm using charged up on the leg mods, I am using Void Weapon Surge. So my Void Weapons gain a small bonus to damage when I have an armor charge, as well as Kinetic Weapon Surge. So my Kinetic Weapons will gain bonus damage when I have an armor charge. But since I'm using Grenade Kickstart, it instantly takes those armor charges away. So I like to use Charged Up because it increases the amount of armor charges I can have, where I can stack these two pretty safely. Lastly, on our class item, we have Double Bomber. So reduce grenade cooldown when using our class ability. We're going to be using our Healing Rift a lot. And Time Dilation to increase the armor charge decays, which will allow me to do damage with these Weapon Surge mods for a longer duration. All right, so we have our weapons. We're going to be using Wish Ender for the anti-barrier and the insane nutty damage that Wish Ender does. I'm going to be using a Vouchsafe with 4 times the charm explosive payload. You can use any void out here. This is just a god roll that I have. And then a corrective measure for the ad clear. All right, the other 2 subclasses I recommend your fire team runs if you're not running this solo would be the Void Hunter invis. Just keep yourselves alive. You know, if there's threshers and stuff, you can go invis and dodge all the missiles. If you're the last man standing, for example. If you want to see that, go back to 542. And the other one would be a Warlock. Warlock's King, keep you and your allies alive. So if you want to see that one, skip back to 1145. All right, for the last two GMs that we have, which are Glassway and Lake of Shadows, I'm going to be using the same build. It is the Necrotic Grip Osteostriga Strand Warlock build. I touched on this previously. I will put the timestamp of that on the screen. So feel free to just pause the video here, take a screenshot of the aspects and fragments. I am going to go over the very few changes that I made. First, we're going to be talking about Glassway. So every mod is basically the same except for the resist mods. I'm using the arc resist for the fallen that are in that GM and the double void resist for the boss. For the weapons, I'm going to be using Osteostriga. I'm going to be using a Vorpal Cartesian because if you did not know, Osteostriga's poison damage is bugged with Vorpal. It will continue to tick as long as you have a Vorpal weapon in your hand, and you can infinitely do damage with it. It's pretty busted. And lastly, our corrective measure for add clear and damage. All right, and lastly, for the Lake of Shadows part, again, it is literally the same exact build as the previous strand build. Like, literally the same one. I made two changes. Those changes, the resist mods, I'm using double arc resist for the boss and one void resist for the Chimera, I believe it's called, the Taken Servitor that spawns Hertz void damage resist. The other one change I made, instead of using Vorpal Cartesian, I'm using Vouchsafe, 4x charm, explosive payload. Everything else exactly the same. Last but not least, the other subclasses I recommend for both Glassway and Lake of Shadows are Arc Titan. With Arc Titan, you have really good ad control with the Storm Grenades and Heart of Inmost Light ability spam. Especially for Glassway, your Arc Grenades will actually jolt the overloads and will actually stun them if you use the correct fragments and everything and aspects. And the other one I recommend is a Void Hunter, just for survivability. The two boss rooms for Glassway and Lake of Shadows are both very aids and are pretty hectic. So just going invis to stay alive, res your teammates, is very good to have. That's going to do it for me. I hope you guys found this video helpful. I wanted to put together a video of the builds that I'm going to be using in my solo GM attempts, as well as put together a few builds for, you know, your fire team members if you're not going to do these solo, just so you can kind of see what they should use, give them an insight of what they should use to help you get the GM done as fast as possible. Speaking of the GMs, I will be soloing each one. I will be putting these builds to good use to show you just how good they are. So be on the lookout for that. GMs start April 11th, so I will have a completion for each of these 6 GMs using these builds. Hope you found it helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.